Chapter 1. Rising from the ashes in the grey dawn of May 5, 2014, in the small coastal town of Berdyansk on the shores of the Sea of Azov, Oleksandr son Kat Kovalenko awoke to a low rumbling that echoed through the weathered apartment blocks. He was 22 years old, a former student at Kiev National University with dreams of becoming a historian. But history had caught up to him now with brutal force. Russia's flag waved illegally over the border, and separatists, egged on by Moscow's spies, marched into Donbass like a nightmare pulled from an old Soviet archive. Oleksandr's hometown of Mariupol, the industrial heart of the Azov region, was under threat. He could no longer hide behind books on Cossack uprisings. It was time to become part of a new one. Oleksandr sat at the kitchen table, his fingers trembling around a cold cup of tea, while the news on the cracked TV screen showed scenes from Slavyansk: burning cars, screaming women clinging to soldiers in Russian uniforms. His mother, a weary nurse with wrinkles deeper than the Black Sea's waves, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Oleksandr, you're too young for this. Stay here, build a life." But his father, an old steelworker from the Azovstal plant, nodded silently toward the door. "The blood calls, son. The Sea of Azov has always demanded its heroes." It was Andriy Bieletsky who ignited the spark. A charismatic leader with eyes that burned like phosphorus, Bieletsky had founded the patriotic movement, Patriot of Ukraine. He called a meeting in an abandoned warehouse by the harbor, where the smell of salt and rust mingled with the tension from a handful of men, veterans from the Maidan Revolution, soccer ultras, and young idealists like Oleksandr. "We are not an army," Bieletsky's voice boomed, cutting through the air like a bayonet. "We are a shield, the Azov Battalion, named after the sea that shaped us, wild, unyielding, eternal." Oleksandr stepped forward, his heart pounding like a drum in a Cossack dance. He had never held a weapon, but he remembered his grandfather's tales of partisan fighters hiding in the forests during the Nazi occupation. "I'm in," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. The others cheered, slapping his back with hands that smelled of gasoline and sweat. That same night, they swore the oath to defend Ukraine against the invasion, to protect the people, to never yield an inch. Training began in secret. In the derelict factories around Berdyansk, they ran through muddy fields, learning to handle AK-47s that weighed like sin on their shoulders. The instructors were tough. A former ATO soldier with scars crisscrossing his face showed them how to disassemble a grenade launcher under fire. "Azov is not for the weak," he growled. "We are the fire that purifies." Oleksandr sweated through the nights, his muscles screaming, but every ache reminded him of the freedom they fought for. He dreamed of Mariupol. The wide boulevards, the theater with its golden domes, the children playing on the beach. It could not fall. The first reports of separatist attacks on Mariupol came like thunder. Azov Battalion marched out. They were only 300 strong, equipped with whatever they could scrounge: stolen weapons from corrupt police, donated helmets, and a will of steel. Oleksandr sat in a truck, the wind whipping his face, as they sang Oi u luzy Chervona Kalina, the old partisan song that echoed like a promise of victory. They didn't know they were becoming legends in the making. The night before the battle, they shared bread and talked in circles around bonfires. A guy from Lviv, Petro, laughed and told jokes about Russian generals drinking vodka from boots. But beneath the laughter lay the fear, a cold serpent in the gut. Oleksandr wrote a letter to his mother: "If I fall, bury me by the sea, tell them I died a free man." He folded it carefully and tucked it into his inner pocket. When dawn broke and the bullets began to whistle, Oleksandr felt a peace he had never known. They were no longer boys, they were Azov, the hero's shield. The days blurred into a relentless rhythm of drills and whispers of strategy. Oleksandr found himself paired with a grizzled veteran named Dmitro, who had fought in the Soviet-Afghan War before turning against the empire that birthed it. Dmitro's hands were calloused like old leather, and he taught Oleksandr not just how to aim, but how to breathe with the rifle, to become one with the weapon. "See the enemy not as a man, but as a shadow on the land that must be banished," Dmitro would say, his voice a gravelly whisper during night watches. Oleksandr absorbed it all, his mind racing with visions of ancient Scythian warriors who once roamed these steppes, bows drawn against invaders. Word spread quickly through the underground networks. Volunteers trickled in, tattooed ultras from metalist Kharkiv, who brought their fierce loyalty and chants that could rally the dead. Philosophy students from Odessa, quoting Shevchenko's poems as they cleaned rifles. Even a few women, like Olna, a former journalist with a sharp eye for reconnaissance, who insisted on proving herself in the mud alongside the men. The warehouse meetings grew crowded, the air thick with cigarette smoke and fervent debates. Bieletsky paced like a caged wolf, sketching maps on crate lids, outlining how Azov would plug the gaps in Ukraine's fractured defenses. One evening, as the sun dipped into the Azov, painting the waves blood-red, a scout burst in with dire news. Separatist convoys were massing just east of Mariupol, T-72 tanks rumbling like beasts from the grave. The room fell silent, then erupted. "We move tonight," Bieletsky declared. Oleksandr felt his stomach twist, but he strapped on his vest, patched together from surplus flak jackets, and checked his magazine. 12 rounds, it would have to do. The convoy rolled out under cover of darkness, a ragged line of battered Ural trucks and civilian vans, headlights off to avoid drawing eyes from the sky. Oleksandr rode in the back with Petro and a dozen others, the truck bed jolting over potholes that threatened to shatter teeth. They passed checkpoints manned by nervous territorial defense volunteers, who waved them through with salutes and muttered prayers. "God with you, brothers," one said, his voice cracking. Oleksandr nodded, clutching his rifle like a talisman. As they neared Mariupol's outskirts, the first signs of war appeared. Abandoned cars with doors ajar, windows shattered like broken promises. The air grew heavy with the acrid tang of smoke from distant fires. They dismounted in a copse of pines, the seas murmur a faint counterpoint to the tension. Bieletsky gathered them in a tight huddle. "This is our stand. For every home, every child, every dream they've come to steal, Azov holds." Oleksandr's first patrol was a blur of adrenaline and terror. They crept through suburban streets lined with oligarch mansions now pocked with bullet holes, ears straining for the crunch of boots or the growl of engines. A sniper's crack split the night. Oleksandr dove behind a garden wall, heart hammering. It was a false alarm, a branch snapping under a fox's paw, but the lessons stuck. War sharpened the senses to a razor's edge. Back at base, exhaustion warred with euphoria. They had scouted the separatist positions, a makeshift HQ in an old school, guarded by pro-Russian thugs more bully than soldier. Plans formed, hit-and-run raids to disrupt supply lines, propaganda leaflets dropped from drones, cobbled from hobby kits. Oleksandr volunteered for the first raid, his voice steady despite the knot in his throat. The raid came at midnight. They slipped through the shadows like ghosts, Oleksandr covering the rear with Petro. The school loomed, its playground swings creaking mournfully. A guard lit a cigarette, foolish mistake. Dimitro's knife flashed, silent and sure. Inside, chaos, overturned desks, maps pinned to walls showing advances toward Kiev. They planted charges, swiped documents, and melted away as alarms wailed. The explosion lit the horizon like a false dawn. Cheers erupted back at camp, but Oleksandr lay awake, the guard's gurgling last breath replaying in his mind. Heroism tasted of ash, but it burned bright. Azov was born in fire, and Oleksandr was its son. Chapter 2, Baptism by Fire. The Second Battle of Mariupol in June 2014 was hell on earth. Azov Battalion arrived like a gale, their black flags emblazoned with the golden wolf's angel, the symbol of unyielding protection, flapping in the wind from the Sea of Azov. Separatists, armed with Russian tanks and grenade launchers, had already seized much of the city. The streets, once echoing with children's laughter and street vendors' calls, were now a labyrinth of burning barricades and screams. Oleksandr crawled through an alley near the central square, his heart thumping in time with the machine gun bursts. His unit, a platoon of 20 under the command of the seasoned Captain Wolf, a 35-year-old ex-SBU agent with tattoos narrating tales of lost brothers, advanced methodically. "Hold formation," Wolf whispered, his voice a low growl. They're more, but we're smarter. Azov doesn't bend. The air reeked of burned rubber and cordite, and every step felt like treading on glass. Oleksandr remembered his first firefight. Pressing his cheek to the rifle stock, sighting a shadow behind a sandbag. Fire, recoil, the shadow crumpled. Nausea came later, in a lull as they hunkered in a bombed-out school. "You saved me," Petro said, clapping his shoulder. "That was a sniper." Oleksandr smiled wanly, but inside he twisted. War wasn't like movies. It was blood seeping through bandages, friends screaming until their voices broke. The battle intensified at the theater. Separatists had barricaded themselves there, machine guns spitting death from the windows. Azov used their intimate knowledge of the city, Mariupol was home, to flank them. Oleksandr led a small team through the sewers beneath the street, water up to their waists, rats gnawing at their boots. The darkness was suffocating, lit only by flashlight beams dancing like specters. "Quiet," he whispered, heart in his throat. They emerged through a manhole, and the world exploded in chaos. Grenades arced overhead, bullets ricocheting off walls like angry hornets. Oleksandr threw himself behind a stone wall, feet slipping in a puddle of blood from a fallen comrade. "Up, for Ukraine," Wolf roared, and they charged. Oleksandr fired shot after shot, each hit a vengeance for the innocents cowering in basements. A separatist rose, face contorted in hate, but Oleksandr's bullet struck the shoulder. The man screamed in Russian, collapsed. It wasn't hate driving Oleksandr, it was love for his people. As the sun set, and Azov raised the blue and yellow flag over the theater once more, they cheered. They had won. Mariupol was free for now, but the cost was high, 12 dead, dozens wounded. Oleksandr sat on the steps, smoking a cigarette scavenged from a pocket, staring at the smoke-shrouded horizon. Petro sat beside him, arm in a sling. "We are heroes now, eh?" He laughed weakly. Oleksandr nodded, but he knew. Heroes bled too, and the war was far from over. The aftermath was a grim harvest. Medics, overworked volunteers like Olna, her hands stained red, triaged the wounded in the shadow of the theater's dome, now scarred black by soot. Oleksandr helped carry stretchers, the weight of broken bodies heavier than any rifle. One boy, no older than 18, clutched his gut, whispering for his mother. Oleksandr held his hand until the light faded from those eyes, the boy's last breath a rattle like gravel in the wind. "Rest easy, brother," he murmured, choking back bile. Wolf gathered the survivors that night in a cleared auditorium, the stage littered with spent casings. "Today we proved Azov's worth," he said, his voice raw but resonant. "But victory is a jealous mistress. Train harder, love fiercer, the sea watches." They nodded, passing around flasks of horilka, harsh grain alcohol that burned like truth. Stories flowed. How Petro had dragged a pinned comrade 50 meters under fire, earning a makeshift medal of a bullet casing strung on twine. How Olna had stitched a femoral artery with fishing line, saving a life that might otherwise fuel the separatists' pyre. Oleksandr's platoon rotated to the front lines east of the city, where the steppe met the suburbs in a no-man's land of trenches and tripwires. Days melted into nights of vigilance, the constant whine of drones, overhead a reminder that Russian eyes were always watching. They built sangars from rubble and tires, camouflaged with nets scavenged from fishing boats. Food was scarce, canned tushonka and black bread that tasted of mold, but spirits held, fueled by radio broadcasts from Kiev praising Azov's stand. One dawn raid tested them anew. Intelligence pinpointed a separatist ammo dump in an old warehouse district. Oleksandr's team infiltrated under fog, ghosts in the mist. The guards were lax, nursing hangovers from looted cellars. They moved like shadows, planting thermite charges that would turn bullets to slag. But betrayal lurked. A local collaborator tipped the enemy. As they withdrew, tracer rounds lit the fog like fireflies from hell. Oleksandr ran, legs pumping, the world narrowing to the burn in his lungs and the slap of boots. A bullet grazed his calf, hot pain blooming, but he pushed on, firing blind over his shoulder. They lost 2 that day, young Victor, headshot clean, and grizzled Ivan caught in a crossfire, his body a sieve. Back in the lines, Oleksandr bandaged his wound with strips from his shirt, refusing morphine. "Pain keeps me sharp," he told Petro, who argued until Wolf intervened. The battle's echoes rippled outward. Azov integrated into the National Guard later that year, but their spirit endured, a brotherhood forged in flame. Oleksandr received his first medal, a simple cross of St. Michael, but he wore it not as a trophy. It was a reminder of the oath, to protect, to fight, to survive. And in quiet moments by the sea, waves lapping at his feet, he vowed silently. Mariupol would never fall, while Azov breathed. Chapter 3, Shadows of Azovstal. In 2022, the storm returned, fiercer than ever. On February 24, Russia's full-scale invasion exploded like a tsunami across Ukraine. Oleksandr, now 30 and a sergeant in the Azov regiment, stood on Mariupol's streets once more. The city of his childhood was bombed to rubble. Azov, now a full-fledged brigade with thousands of soldiers, formed the backbone of the defense. They dug trenches deeper than ever, rigged traps in the ruins, and swore to hold the line to the last breath. The siege began in March, an 86-day nightmare of artillery barrages, airstrikes, and starvation. Oleksandr led his platoon in the shattered neighborhoods near the port, where the air hummed with drone buzz and grenade thuds. "Hold position," he shouted over the radio, voice hoarse from dust and cries. His soldiers, a mix of veterans and green recruits, men and women fighting shoulder to shoulder, crawled through tunnels under the streets, evading Russian patrols that hunted them like rats. Inside Azovstal, the massive steelworks sprawling like an industrial labyrinth, they were trapped. Thousands of civilians sheltered in the catacombs, while Azov held the Russians at bay. Oleksandr remembered the first night. Darkness smothered everything, broken only by dripping pipes and the wounded's moans. Food ran out after 2 weeks. They brewed soup from rainwater and algae scraped from channels. "We eat like Cossacks," he joked with his friend, medic assistant Marta, whose hands were bloody from endless dressings. But laughter died as bombs fell closer. One April night, during a Russian assault, Oleksandr showed his true heroism. A Russian tank rolled through a breach in the wall, its cannon bellowing fire. His platoon was exhausted, ammo low. "Oleksandr, it's over," Petro yelled, now a lieutenant with a prosthetic arm from 2014. But Oleksandr rose, snatched an RPG-7 from a dead comrade, and dashed into the open, a silhouette against the flares. A bullet whizzed past his ear, but he fired. The rocket slammed the turret, erupting in a fireball of flame and shrapnel. The crewman screamed, but Oleksandr didn't hear. He was already hauling his men to safety. For every victory, losses mounted. Marta perished in an airstrike, her body crushed under rubble. Oleksandr dug the grave himself, tears mixing with sweat. "She died a hero," he whispered, but grief seared like acid. They endured 82 days of total encirclement, eliminating thousands of enemies, as post-battle reports would confirm. The world watched via live streams from soldiers like Oleksandr, who smuggled his phone to show the truth. Ukrainian heroes, not the Nazis Putin lied about. The order came on May 16, 2022, withdraw. They didn't surrender, they survived to fight again. Oleksandr marched out head high, shackled but unbroken, as Russians jeered. In captivity at Olnivka, they were tortured. 53 died in an explosion that was a massacre. But Oleksandr's spirit didn't break. He whispered psalms in the dark, recalling Azovstal's fire as a baptism of purity. The siege's grip tightened like a vice. Early days brought hope, Zelensky's voice crackling over hidden radios, urging resilience. "Mariupol is Ukraine," he declared, and Azov's fighters etched those words into their hearts. Oleksandr's platoon fortified bunkers in the plant's bowels, welding steel plates over entrances, stocking what little they had. RPGs, javelins smuggled in before the noose closed, and mines planted in every shadow. Civilians poured in, grandmothers clutching icons, children wide-eyed with terror. Azov set up aid stations, rationing protein bars and iodine tablets. Marta shone here, her gentle touch calming a boy whose leg was mangled by shrapnel. "It'll heal, little warrior," she cooed, injecting antibiotics pilfered from a ruined pharmacy. Oleksandr watched, admiring her fire, their bond deepening in stolen moments amid the chaos, a shared cigarette, a brush of hands. Russian assaults came in waves. The first major push hit the administrative building, where snipers nested in the cooling towers. Oleksandr's team countered with Molotovs and drone-dropped grenades, turning the yard into a kill zone. He personally took down a squad leader with a headshot at 300 meters, the scope's crosshairs steady despite the shake in his soul. "One less butcher," he muttered, reloading. Hunger gnawed deeper than bullets. By week 4, they chewed leather belts, traded jokes about feasting on Russian boots. Water came from condensation on pipes, tasting of rust and desperation. Disease crept in, dysentery from tainted sources, wounds festering without antibiotics. Oleksandr lost count of the burials, each a quiet rite in the tunnels, comrades wrapped in tarps, lowered into alcoves with a salute and a prayer. The tank incident was a turning point. Dawn light filtered through cracks as the T-90 breached, its tracks grinding concrete to dust. Shells punched holes in walls, shrapnel singing death. Petro's shout pulled Oleksandr from daze. He saw the RPG, half buried under rubble, and moved without thought. The run was eternity, 20 meters of exposed ground, each step a gamble. The launcher's weight dragged, but muscle memory kicked in. Boom. The tank halted, secondary explosions ripping it apart. Cheers echoed, but Oleksandr collapsed, leg afire, blood soaking his boot. Marta patched him, her fingers deft. "Foolish hero," she teased, eyes shining. Their kiss was brief, fierce, a spark in the abyss, but fate is cruel. Days later, Su-25 jets screamed low, cluster bombs shredding the medical wing. Oleksandr dug frantically, nails splintering, until he uncovered her, still peaceful amid the debris. Rage fueled him then. He led a counter-raid that night, ambushing a Russian sapper team, capturing intel on troop movements. Global eyes turned. Satellites captured Azovstal's smoke plumes, journalists smuggled stories out. Oleksandr's video, a defiant clip of fighters raising the flag amid ruins, went viral, millions viewing the unbowed. Propaganda wars raged. Kremlin trolls labeled them extremists, but truth pierced Azov as defenders, diverse ranks including Jews, Muslims, patriots all. Evacuation whispers grew. Corridors for civilians opened, but fighters held. When the order came, relief warred with sorrow. They filed out, weapons grounded, into buses under Red Cross watch. Taunts followed, Nazis, but Oleksandr met gazes with steel. Olnivka was hell, beatings, mock executions, the blast that claimed 53 in a staged inferno. In solitary, chained to walls, Oleksandr recited Cossack epics, visions of sea and home sustaining him. Azovstal had forged him anew, unbreakable. Chapter 4, the Phoenix reborn after months in captivity, freedom struck like lightning. In September 2022, Oleksandr and hundreds of Azov warriors were exchanged for Russian prisoners and Medvedchuk, Putin's puppet. He stepped off the plane in Kiev, sun warm on pale skin, crowds chanting Azov, Azov, like a hymn. Zelensky called them heroes who changed the war's course. Oleksandr knelt, kissing Ukrainian soil, tears flowing free. He was home, but heroes don't rest. Azov, now a brigade shed of old shadows, the US lifted its arms ban in 2024 after rigorous vetting, rebuilt stronger. Oleksandr became an instructor, training recruits in modern warfare, drones, yield jamming, trench fighting in Verdun style. "We're not extremists," he told them, voice steady as granite. "We're Ukraine's shield. We protect the weak, fight for freedom." In 2025, with the war raging on, Oleksandr led a raid near Avdiivka. They infiltrated Russian lines under night's cover, rescuing a village from occupation. Bullets whistled, grenades thundered, but his troops, brothers and sisters in blood and fire, followed blindly. As they raised the flag again, they sang, Kalina echoed over fields. Oleksandr stood by the sea in Mariupol, freed in his dreams, wind carrying salt and hope. He was no longer the boy of 2014, he was the legend. Azov lived, unyielding, heroically brave, eternal. And as long as the sea rolled, they would fight. The exchange was a blur of tension and triumph. Blindfolded on the bus to the border, Oleksandr gripped Petro's hand, whispers of doubt mingling with defiance. If they double-cross, Petro trailed off, but the swap held, Ukrainian medics waiting, helicopters thumping overhead. In Kiev, the airport erupted, families, flags, tears. Oleksandr's mother crushed him in an embrace, her sobs a balm. My boy, my hero. Rehabilitation was grueling. Physical therapy for his leg, therapy for scars unseen. Nightmares of Azovstal's dark haunted him, explosions, martyr's face, but comrades' stories anchored him. Azov support groups formed, sharing vodka and victories, rebuilding psyches as firmly as units. Training grounds buzzed. Oleksandr drilled recruits in the Carpathians, forests echoing with simunition pops. Adapt or die, he barked, teaching drone ops, FPVs rigged with grenades, spotting from cheap quadcopters. Women like Sofia, a coder-turned-operator, excelled, jamming Russian signals with backpack rigs. Azov's evolution, Oleksandr marveled, seeing the old ultras fire in new tech-savvy blood. Politics swirled. Old smears lingered, but Azov's deeds silenced many, aid convoys to liberated towns, demining teams saving lives. In 2024, U.S. aid flowed, HIMARS, optics, after audits confirmed reform. Bieletsky long gone, the regiment professionalized, diverse as Ukraine itself. The Avdiivka raid was legend. Intel from partisans pinpointed a Russian salient threatening a village of 500. Oleksandr's team, 40 elite, night vision green, slipped through minefields, ghosts in the snow. First contact, silent takedowns, knives flashing. Then storm, breaching compounds, freeing hostages bound in barns. A Russian major begged quarter. Oleksandr zip-tied him, mercy his weapon. By dawn, the village flew blue-yellow, villagers weeping gratitude. Casualties light, one wounded, airlifted out. Back at base, toasts rang, to Azov, eternal. Oleksandr slipped away to the sea, Mariupol's ghost calling. Waves crashed, whispering of rebirth. He traced Marta's locket, vowing. For her, for all the fight endures. Years on, Azov stood as symbol, resilient, reformed, revered. Oleksandr, grey at temples, mentored the next wave, stories his legacy. Ukraine's shield gleamed, forged in unquenched fire. Epilogue, legacy of steel, as the dust settles over Mariupol's ruins and the echoes of battles fade in the wind. The spirit of Azov lives on as an eternal flame in Ukraine's heart. Oleksandr, now a legend among legends, stands at the sea's edge, gazing at the horizon where the sun rises anew. The war may rage, but Azov has shown the world that freedom is not a gift, but a conquest. Their sacrifices, the blood that watered the earth, the names of fallen brothers and sisters etched in memory, have shaped a nation stronger than steel. From Azovstal's catacombs to Avdiivka's fields, their legacy inspires new generations to take up the shield. In every wave crashing against the shore, their cry resounds. Slava Ukraini, Azov is not the end. It is the beginning of an era where heroes rise from the ashes, unyielding as the sea itself. And as long as Ukraine breathes, their saga will continue, a reminder that courage triumphs over tyranny.